Hundreds of tons of German steel churn through the damp peat. An avalanche of gray metal crawls steadily eastward, met only by absolute silence. A single, heavy Soviet machine stands across a narrow forest corduroy road. The Klim-Voroshilov tank waits. August 1941. The Leningrad sector is cracking, splitting at the seams under constant assault. The front has been breached. A column of German troops moves in a route march, certain of their total impunity. Reconnaissance reported empty roads. This failure of German intelligence will be a death sentence for dozens. A deadly trap lies ahead. The narrow dirt road is pinned between natural barriers. To the right, a rotting, deep swamp. To the left, an impassable mire. Maneuver is out of the question. Turning around is impossible. The Soviet tank commander understands this perfectly. He peers through the narrow slit of the triplex, the thick lens distorting the dull morning light. Inside the armored box, gloom reigns. The air is thick and heavy, reeking of scorched engine oil, the acrid cordite stench of past battles, and sour human sweat. The radio gives a dry click. Static stabs sharply at the ears. Through the crackle of the airwaves, the distorted voice of a staff officer breaks through. "Rubin, column has passed grid square 7. Stop them at any cost." "Copy that. Executing." The commander releases the stiff key. The dialogue is over. The order is not subject to debate. The earth beneath the multi-ton steel hull vibrates faintly. The distant roll of heavy artillery strikes the ears. 47 tons of steel resonate, absorbing the shockwave. The metal hums. The commander assesses the disposition. The arithmetic of the coming battle is devoid of mercy. 1 tank gun and a 5-man crew against the enemy's mechanized vanguard. Dozens of armored vehicles, hundreds of trained soldiers. The commander's brain works fast and cold, casting aside emotion. Fear paralyzes and kills. Only dry calculation remains. If this line falls, the steel avalanche will break into operational space. There are no reserves behind them. The road to the city will be wide open. The price of their lives is the time they buy. Every minute is worth the lives of the infantry behind them. The rhythm of the floor's vibration changes. The driver-mechanic grips the steel control levers until his knuckles turn white. The engine is idling, its blue-gray exhaust compromising their camouflaged position. The commander strikes the driver's shoulder with a heavy boot. "Kill the engine!" The roar of the diesel cuts out instantly. A crushing, unnatural silence sets in. The forest goes still. In this void, a new sound emerges clearly. The clank of tracks, the squeak of road wheels, the crunch of breaking timber. The sound is bearing down. The enemy is closing in. The distance is closing rapidly. The gunner presses his face tight against the rubber eyepiece of the sight, the optics fogging from his ragged breathing. He wipes the moisture away with the coarse wool of his sleeve. His fingers grip the handwheels of the laying mechanisms in a death grip, the metal chilling his skin. The loader freezes by the ammo rack. A heavy fixed round already lies in the breech, the block closed. The armor-piercing shell waits for its target. The crew has transformed into a single mechanism. The men have become appendages of the gun, the living engines of the turret. A sharp sound strikes the frontal armor plate. The crew flinches in unison, muscles contracting in anticipation of an explosion. Silence. A dry pine branch has fallen from the canopy and struck the metal. Nerves are frayed. The waiting is exhausting. It devours internal resources. The psyche cracks under the monstrous pressure of inevitability. Every minute in the cramped box lasts for hours. Time thickens. The commander takes a deep breath, steadying his pulse. Panic kills before the first shot. He scans the men. No one looks away. Everyone understands the task. There are no illusions. The heavy Soviet machine was built for breaking through fortifications. The engineers designed it with a monstrous margin of safety, the thickness of its armor making the tank invulnerable to the enemy's standard guns. Now, the machine has become an anvil, a solitary shield in the path of the offensive. The sound of foreign engines rises until it turns into physical pressure. The vibration travels through the peat soil into the rollers, thumping against the floor. Dust rises above the tops of the pines as a gray veil crawls along the road. The first dark silhouettes emerge through the morning mist, angular turret shapes and short gun barrels. The enemy moves in a tight formation, the distance between vehicles minimal. The Germans are in a hurry. They do not expect a head-on blow. The commander catches the lead vehicle in the crosshairs, his fingers resting on the trigger. The range drops. 800 meters, 700, 600. The gun is capable of hitting the target, but the commander hesitates. He lets the column deep into the trap, allowing the enemy to enter the narrowest section. The gunner cannot withstand the tension. Target in the sights. Wait. The voice is dry. 500 meters. 400. The driver of the lead German tank opens his vision hatch, turning his face into the oncoming wind. 300 meters. The trap is ready to spring. To the right, the boggy mud begins. To the left, the stagnant water turns black. It is physically impossible to turn around. If the lead vehicle stops, the column will freeze. The kill zone has been formed. The commander clenches his jaw until it creaks. The arithmetic of death requires absolute precision. One firing point against dozens of targets. An error is unacceptable. A miss will give the enemy a chance to maneuver. The first shot decides the outcome of the battle. It sets the tempo for the slaughter. The shell must penetrate the frontal armor, cause an ammo cook-off, and halt the advance. Inside the tank, the temperature rises. The crew's breathing heats the stale air. The loader keeps his hands near the breech, ready to eject the red-hot casing and ram a new shell. The heavy breech block glints with factory grease. The metal hull waits for the brutal recoil. Tension strikes at exposed nerves, and the pressure in their temples pulses in time with the foreign engines. The commander's gaze is locked onto the grey square of armor in the optics. His finger takes up the slack on the trigger. The ambush has become a compressed steel spring. 250 meters. The point of no return has been passed. The enemy has entered the zone of guaranteed destruction. A muscle spasms. The command is ready to burst from his lips. The silence before the first blow weighs heavier than lead. Camouflaging 47 tons of metal is difficult. Hiding the jagged edges of a turret among the soft lines of the forest is nearly impossible. The crew did it in silence. Shovels bit into the dry peat with a crunch. The ground resisted, the roots of ancient pines tearing at the blunt blades of the entrenching tools. Sweat poured into their eyes, the salty drops stinging their skin. Cotton tunics darkened with moisture, sticking fast to their backs. The tankers methodically covered the gleaming steel tracks with damp earth and hacked off heavy fir branches. Sticky resin stained their hands. Green needles lay in a thick layer over the sun-warmed armor. The heavy tank's silhouette broke, distorted, and merged with the thick shadow of the undergrowth. The engineering solution to an impossible task was complete. The steel monster had completely dissolved into the forest wilderness. The crew takes their places. The heavy hatches slam shut with a clang. Steel bolts screech against metal, sealing the men off from the outside world. The waiting begins. Hours stretch into a sluggish eternity. Inside the armored capsule, there is no air. Only a thick, heavy mixture of toxic diesel fumes, acrid grease, and hot human breath. 5 men share a tiny volume of space, sitting in a locked iron box. Knees press hard against the ammo racks. Backs rub against the cold, textured metal. The temperature climbs relentlessly. The stifling air presses down on their lungs like a heavy weight. Breathing is difficult, becoming shallow, ragged, and superficial. The silence strikes brutally at the eardrums. There is no wind in the forest. The birds are silent. This ringing void weighs on the psyche more terrifyingly than the roar of artillery. A barrage provides a clear, tangible threat and dictates simple actions. But forest silence drives a man mad. It leaves him alone with his own fear. The beat of the heart echoes with dull thuds in the temples. Blood pulses noisily in the ears. The brain automatically paints pictures of approaching death. The frontal armor reaches 75 millimeters in thickness, but the illusion of absolute safety is deceptive. The tankers know the harsh truth. Thick, rolled steel saves you from armor-piercing shells, but it does not protect you from animal fear. Death will find a way through the narrow vision slits or the ventilation ports. The armor simply provides a reprieve. 5 different people cease to exist. A living organism fuses with soulless mechanics. The commander becomes the eyes of the heavy tank. The gunner, its nervous system. The driver-mechanic turns into steel muscles, and the loader into a pulsing heart, pumping shells through the veins of the gun. The mechanisms harshly dictate the rhythm. Bodies adapt to the angular geometry of the machine, the angle of the back, the turn of the head, the firm grip on the handles. Words vanish as unnecessary. A voice is no longer needed. Combat telepathy is at work. The commander barely shifts the angle of his shoulder, and the gunner instantly adjusts the sector of fire. The loader places a calloused palm on the breech, controlling the cold metal of the fixed round. One fleeting movement replaces dozens of shouts. They read each other by the frequency of their breathing and the tension of the bulging veins in their necks. Suddenly there is a snap, sharp, loud. A dry branch breaks under someone's heavy weight outside. The sound strikes exposed nerves like a whip crack. The silence is shattered. The gunner's body reacts faster than thought. Instinct outpaces the mind. His back muscles contract sharply. His face is pressed hard into the stiff rubber eyepiece of the telescopic sight. His fingers dig into the knurled handwheels of the vertical lay. His right eye is cut by the distorted light of the optics. His left is squeezed shut until it aches. The loader shifts his body weight to his front leg, his right hand freezing a millimeter from the tray. A second stretches into infinity. A second. A third. The optics show an absolutely empty forest. No movement on the horizon. Only gray dust swirls slowly in the slanted rays of the sun. The tension recedes, leaving behind a sticky, cold sweat on the spine. A false alarm. The forest lives its own life. But the trap is already set. The spring is compressed to the limit. The machine has frozen in a perfect ambush. The geometry of the trap is calibrated to the millimeter. To the right, an impassable bog rots. To the left stretches a swampy forest. The narrow dirt ribbon of the road lies straight before the gun. The sector of fire is absolutely clear. The trajectory of an armor-piercing shell will meet no obstacles. This is the pure mathematics of annihilation. The tank stands at an ideal angle, the frontal hull plates ready to take a terrible blow with the maximum probability of a ricochet. Engineers spent months calculating these angles. The crew uses them for survival. The cramped space twists the joints. Muscles ache unbearably from long immobility. Changing position is strictly forbidden. Any extra sound will immediately betray the camouflaged position. The clatter of a hobnailed boot against the ribbed floor would carry for dozens of meters. The metal hull would act as a giant resonator. The men grit their teeth and endure. The pain in their cramped legs becomes dull, familiar, slowly receding into the background. In the foreground remains only the narrow slit of the triplex. The world narrows to a stretch of dusty road, a road along which death will soon travel. The commander does not tear his piercing gaze from the observation device. "Water!" The radio operator gunner silently hands over a battered metal canteen. The commander's fingers firmly grip the cold aluminum. He takes one short swallow, wetting his parched throat. The water tastes of rusty iron and old rubber. He hands the canteen back. The movements are extremely sparse and precise. Unnecessary gestures have been abolished. Energy is strictly conserved for the main thrust. The sun rises relentlessly higher. Direct rays strike the armor, and the metal begins to radiate its accumulated heat inward. The capsule slowly turns into a red-hot oven. The air thickens even more. Large beads of sweat gather on the gunner's thick eyebrows, but he does not wipe them away. His hands are busy with his work. Sweat pours into his eye like acrid salt. He blinks rapidly, clearing the moisture. The sight must be clean. Optics do not forgive the slightest error. A blurry lens means a certain miss, and a miss means death. The price of a mistake is measured in the lives of 5 men. The mechanical heart of the machine is silent. 12 cylinders await the order. 47 tons have frozen. The string is pulled tight. The whitish morning mist slowly tears into gray rags. Angular steel boxes crawl out of the damp forest hollow. The Wehrmacht vanguard moves confidently, arrogantly, without reconnaissance. High-performance gasoline engines roar, filling the forest with a low hum. Wide metal tracks grind the logs of the old corduroy road with a rhythmic clatter. White crosses stand out clearly on the dark gray turrets. The enemy moves in a dense, monolithic column, the distance between vehicles criminally small. The German tankers feel like the rightful masters of this land. The hatches of the commander's cupolas are carelessly thrown back. Officers in black uniforms calmly scan the empty forest through first-class binoculars. They do not expect a frontal strike. Offensive momentum blinds them. The error of tactical reconnaissance will soon be paid for in blood. The road is a narrow wooden ribbon thrown over a rotting swamp. Beneath the decaying logs, a bottomless peat mire squelches. To the right, stagnant dead water turns black, thick with green duckweed. To the left stretches an impassable viscous quagmire, where fallen tree trunks slowly rot. The mechanics of the ambush are primitive, cruel, and absolutely flawless. The enemy has locked himself into a natural corridor. A step to the left or right means the inevitable loss of equipment. A multi-ton machine would simply sink into the stinking sludge up to its turret. Maneuver is physically impossible. Turning around is technically impossible. The column can only move in one direction, straight into the crosshairs of the Soviet optical sight. Inside the camouflaged heavy tank, time stops completely. The air is thick enough to be cut with a knife. The gunner stops breathing. His right eye has fused to the hard rubber eyepiece. The rangefinder scale slowly, relentlessly crawls over the angular silhouette of the lead German tank. 300 meters. 250. 200. His heart beats against his ribs with such crushing force that a dull pain throbs in his temples. The loader's hand is frozen in a stone grip on the heavy breech handle. The cold metal slips treacherously from the sticky sweat. The men's nerves are stretched beyond physical limits. The silence inside the cramped fighting compartment presses down on their shoulders, heavier than the multi-ton frontal armor. Every extra second of waiting ruthlessly burns out the psyche. The commander watches continuously through the narrow slit of the triplex. He coldly calculates the target's speed, assesses the angle of the enemy's armor, and waits for the single perfect moment. If they strike too early, the column will have time to reverse and escape. If they are even a second late, the lead vehicle will slip past the deadly fire sack. The trap must snap shut for good. Armor piercing. The commander's voice sounds dry, hollow, devoid of emotion. Ready. Lead tank. Under the turret. Fire! The gunner's finger pulls the stiff trigger sharply, without hesitation. An electric pulse strikes the primer. A flash. The cramped space of the turret is instantly illuminated by a sickly yellow light. The powder charge detonates in the casing with a roar. The monstrous pressure of incandescent gases pushes the heavy steel slug along the steep rifling of the barrel. 47 tons of Soviet metal shudder from the wild, untamed recoil. The massive breech of the gun flies back with a clang, nearly striking the men. The recoil mechanisms hiss as they dampen the terrifying kinetic energy. A smoking brass casing flies out of the opening wedge gate with a ring, crashing into the metal floor tray. Acrid, suffocating powder gas instantly fills the cabin, stinging the eyes. The 76mm shell covers the distance in a fraction of a second. A direct hit. The crash of the impact drowns out the roar of dozens of engines. Soviet steel rips through the frontal armor plate of the German machine with a crunch. Kinetic energy instantly tears the strong, welded seams apart. The metal bursts with a sickening, ear-piercing shriek. The armor-piercing shell bores through the protection and detonates deep inside the enemy fighting compartment. The turret of the lead tank jerks upward convulsively and freezes at an angle. From the open commander's hatches, a tight orange flame erupts under immense pressure. Thick, black, oily smoke blankets the road. The mangled machine stops dead, as if hitting a wall. The right track flies off the drive sprocket with a clang and settles on the logs like a dead snake. The burning iron completely blocks the narrow corduroy road. The trap has snapped shut. The way forward is closed forever. The confident marching offensive of the Wehrmacht elite breaks in an instant. The perfect geometric formation turns into bloody chaos. The driver of the second tank slams on the brakes in a panic. The multi-ton machine skids on the slippery timber and slams into the burning lead wreck with a dull clang. The armored vehicles following in the tight column frantically, blindly try to stop. The screech of tearing metal, the crunch of breaking logs, the shouting of commands. A wave of primal fear rolls from the head of the column to its tail. The enemy is completely disoriented, pinned on a narrow strip of land in the middle of a lethal, boggy swamp. The turrets of the surviving German tanks rotate frantically in search of the threat. Electric drives howl. German optics hurriedly search for the target. They find the source of the fire. The low-slung, broad silhouette of an unknown giant merged with the edge of the forest. Short, barking commands in German tear through the air. Barrels swing around. A volley. The air howls piercingly from flying steel. The shells strike dead on target. Inside the Soviet machine, a localized hell breaks loose. A terrifying, continuous clatter strikes the ears. The turret walls vibrate faintly from the monstrous direct hits. Scale and flaked paint shower down on the tankers' heads like a cutting rain. But the metal holds. The 50mm armor-piercing shells are absolutely powerless against the ultra-thick armor. The kinetic energy of the enemy shots shatters into sheaves of blinding sparks. The slugs ricochet with a piercing, vibrating howl, flying off into the forest thicket, whistling as they shear off the thick tops of the pines. The elite of the German panzer forces leaves only shallow, jagged dents on the hardened Soviet steel. The realization of their own impotence paralyzes the enemy. Their best armor-piercing weapons do not work. The shells simply bounce off the insurmountable barrier, and the barrier is alive. In the suffocating, acrid smoke, through the continuous ringing of ricochets, the loader rubs his palms raw against the metal. He forcefully rams a new shell into the hot breach. The steel wedge of the block slams shut, sealing the barrel. The mechanism of death works without a hitch. The gunner wipes sweat and blood from his face. He cold-bloodedly catches the next gray box in the crosshairs. The enemy is deprived of maneuver. The methodical, engineered annihilation begins. The mechanism of annihilation has been launched. The Soviet tank methodically grinds down the German column. The enemy is locked tight on the narrow corduroy road. The distance is lethally short. A ruthless conveyor belt of death begins. The loader works at the absolute limit of human capability. His movements have long since lost conscious thought and have been reduced to blind muscular automatism. A step to the ammo rack, a firm grip on the heavy fixed round, a short lunge toward the red-hot breech, a sharp ramming, the loud click of the wedge gate, a step back. The gunner catches a new gray target. Fire. The 76mm gun fires without the slightest pause. Every blinding flash inside the turret instantly burns away the remaining oxygen. Acrid powder gases fill the cramped space in a thick layer. The weak ventilator is completely unable to handle the load. The blue-gray smoke cruelly stings the eyes and burns the lungs from the inside. The tankers breathe every other breath, greedily swallowing the toxic gas mixture. The temperature relentlessly climbs past the 50°C mark. Grimy sweat flows in salty streams down soot-stained faces. Cotton tunics are soaked through with sticky moisture and reek heavily of burnt engine oil. Another armor-piercing shell whistles from the barrel, a direct hit. A second German machine erupts into a blinding torch. Roaring flames greedily devour the thin metal. The enemy crew frantically tries to abandon the burning box. With the coaxial tank machine gun, the radio operator cold-bloodedly mows down the scurrying black silhouettes. A short, angry burst strikes the living targets. Men fall dead onto the damp peat. Without emotion, without unnecessary pity. This is simply a hard, infinitely dirty job that must be carried out to the end. Outside, death drums incessantly against the thick armor of the Soviet giant. The German gunners are recovering from their initial shock, hastily massing their forces to unleash a frantic, hysterical barrage from every available barrel. 50mm shells rain down on the sloped glacis, the flat flanks, and the cast turret. The roar is unbearable. Massive impacts shudder through 47 tons of monolithic steel, sending terrible vibrations through the rigid seats that threaten to snap bone. Eardrums burst. A thin trickle of hot blood flows from the commander's ears, but he ignores the wound. The engineering of the Soviet designers is undergoing a brutal trial by fire. The ultra-thick armor withstands the inhuman pressure. Steel slugs strike with fury, but the cold-rolled plating holds firm. The metal hums with a dull, twisting resonance. Green paint and sharp scale crack and fly off the surface. Inside the machine, a rain of tiny, red-hot armor spall showers down from the low ceiling, biting deep into the exposed skin of necks and hands. The tankers ignore the pain entirely. Pain means they are still alive. Another precise shot. A third enemy tank loses its turret, with a deafening screech as a massive internal explosion rips the German ammo rack to pieces. Jagged shards of foreign steel scatter for dozens of yards. The narrow corduroy road is rapidly turning into an impassable graveyard of burning metal. Suddenly, the steady rhythm of battle breaks. A heavy brass casing fails to eject from the breech after a shot. The metal breech block jams tight, the steel extractor slipping off the rim of the shell. A critical failure. The gun falls silent. A terrifying second of hesitation follows. The silence inside the tank cuts the ears more painfully than the explosions. Outside, a dense hail of lead beats fiercely against the turret. The enemy senses weakness instantly, and their fire intensifies manifold. The impacts of the slugs become a frantic staccato. The steel trap threatens to become a mass grave. "Stoppage!" the loader screams hoarsely through his coughing. "Clear it! Fast!" the commander snarls, his eyes glued to the periscope. Time coils into a single, tight knot. There is no help coming. The extraction tool is stowed, and it would take too long to retrieve. Those wasted seconds would cost the lives of the entire crew. The loader lunges toward the white-hot breech. The heavy metal is smoking. He strikes the jammed, searing casing with all his might using his bare hands. The first blow. The second. The skin on his broad palms blisters instantly. The nauseating stench of scorched flesh mixes thickly with acrid powder fumes. Sharp pain pierces his body to the bone, paralyzing his nervous system, but he savagely casts aside his reflexes. Human endurance now exceeds the strength of tank steel. Physiology triumphs over failed mechanics. A third, crushing backhand blow knocks the stuck brass loose. The hot casing falls onto the ribbed floor with a loud clang, painfully burning his legs through his boots. The path is clear again. With raw, horribly burned hands, the loader blindly grabs a new 15-kilogram shell. He rams it into the barrel with incredible force. The breech clacks shut, cutting off any way back. "Ready? Fire!" Another armor-piercing round howls toward the target. A fourth German fighting vehicle grinds to a halt, its flank punched through. The brutal slaughter continues at its previous pace. The crew's physical strain has reached a breaking point. Their exhausted bodies are working toward total depletion. Every heavy turn of the traverse handwheel now requires superhuman effort. Every reload is like lifting a 30-pound weight in a red-hot oven during a continuous earthquake. The crew merges inextricably with the massive machine in a single, desperate impulse for survival. They do not think of grand heroism. They methodically carry out the task at hand. Hard, cold, without the right to make a single mistake. The outside world has narrowed to the thin crosshairs of the telescopic sight. The enemy armored column desperately tries to bite back, firing blindly in hopes of sheer luck. Today, luck is entirely on the side of the thick Soviet armor. Dozens of impacts from enemy slugs merge into one continuous, deafening hum. The heavy tank trembles incessantly, but stands fast, as if rooted to the spot. It has grown into the damp earth,
an insurmountable crag in the path of the German steel flood. The gunner savagely wipes bloody sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. His swollen eye presses against the rubber brow pad again. A new armored target. Another precise shot. The ruthless conveyor of death reaches maximum RPM. German machines burn one after another, lighting up the dark forest with an ominous crimson glow. The myth of German invincibility shatters with a deafening screech. Dozens of flaming hulks have permanently corked the forest road. The elite of the Wehrmacht's panzer forces is bleeding out in the soggy marsh.
Frontal assaults break easily against 75 millimeters of hardened Soviet steel. The enemy finally realizes the futility of direct tank strikes and abruptly changes tactics. Their light guns are powerless. The Germans hastily pull their last, most significant argument to the front line: heavy 88 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. These colossal guns were designed to destroy high-altitude bombers. Now, their long, thick barrels are lowered for direct fire. The crews work with fanatical, desperate speed. The optics of the German sights find the stationary, pockmarked silhouette of the Soviet tank, which stands out against the forest backdrop by a pillar of blue-gray exhaust and powder haze. Impact. The first heavy flak shell slams into the turret. This is no blind ricochet from a light tank. This is a kinetic hammer of monstrous destructive power. 47 tons of monolithic metal physically shudder, shifting backward across the slick peat. The armor holds, but inside the fighting compartment, hell breaks loose. The crew is hurled violently against the steel bulkheads. Concussion descends like a heavy press. The air inside the capsule compresses sharply, battering the eardrums. External sound vanishes completely, the world drowning in an unbearable, high-pitched ringing. Dark blood gushes from the commander's nose and ears. He shakes his head furiously, trying to cast off the blurry veil, his eyes unable to focus. The inner face of the armor is covered in a fine web of microfractures. Deadly hot scale sprays across the cramped cabin, embedding itself deep into the exposed skin of their faces and necks. "Flak gun! Right! 2 o'clock!" the gunner screams. He cannot hear his own voice. He only feels the salty taste of blood on his split lips. "He hit it!" the commander rasps, gripping the gunner's shoulder. A brutal duel of attrition begins. The loader works in a semi-conscious daze. His broad palms are one continuous bloody wound from the red-hot brass. He grinds his teeth until the enamel splinters. He blindly grabs a heavy, high-explosive fragmentation round, the muscles of his exhausted back straining under the weight. The breech clacks hungrily, swallowing death. Fire. The heavy turret recoils from the blast. The return strike lands perfectly. The Soviet HE shell detonates directly in front of the flak gun's shield. Damp earth, twisted metal, and the torn bodies of German gunners fly into the air. The first crew is wiped off the face of the earth. But the enemy does not stop. A second flak gun to the right has already managed to deploy and open fire. Another monstrous blow to the left flank. The light inside the tank goes out instantly. The internal wiring is severed. A thick darkness covers the suffocating, stunned men. Dense, acrid smoke eats at their lungs. The ventilation fan has been killed by a fragment. There is nothing left to breathe. The tankers choke, gasping with dry coughs, but their hands grip the mechanisms tight. In the gloom, lit only by the dull crimson glow of the red-hot breach, the turret traverses toward the new threat with the long, straining howl of the manual drives. The screech of jammed gears grates on the ears.
A second HE shell turns the German position into a smoking black crater. The artillery crisis is temporarily overcome. The enemy guns have fallen silent. The tension does not subside. While the duel of heavy calibers raged, infantry began crawling forward under the cover of the thick black smoke. Sappers, demolition experts, and close-quarters professionals approach, heavily laden with bundles of grenades and magnetic mines. Their task is to get close, blow the tracks, and toss shaped charges onto the thin grating of the engine compartment. They crawl silently through the viscous, stinking muck of the marsh, yard by yard. The sappers enter the dead zone, the area the commander's periscope cannot reach.
The tank is blind, within a 15-yard radius directly under its own barrel. The threat becomes critical. The radio operator gunner senses them on raw instinct. Through the murky, cracked slit of the hull machine gun, he notices a blurred movement. A gray silhouette in a steel helmet rises from the filthy water just 10 yards from the frontal armor. The German sapper drops to one knee, his right hand clutching a bundle of explosives, pulling back for the death blow. There is no time for a report. Instantly, the radio operator mashes the butterfly trigger of the hull machine gun until his fingers crack. The weapon barks in a long, merciless burst. Heavy bullets stitch through the sapper's chest a fraction of a second before the throw. The German's body jerks, thrown back by the rounds. The bundle of grenades falls from dead hands into the quagmire. A powerful explosion sends up a wall of filthy water, drenching the frontal armor. 2 more soldiers rise from the fog behind him, running straight at the machine gun, desperately trying to reach the dead zone. "Infantry front!" the radio operator barks. He doesn't let go of the trigger, only slightly traversing the barrel. A short burst. One falls face first into the peat. A second burst hits home, and the other slumps onto the logs, soaking the corduroy road with blood. The approaches are piled with corpses. The dead zone has been cleared methodically. Seconds before irreparable destruction, the machine's defense worked flawlessly. The heart of the battle has turned into a roiling cauldron. The Soviet tank is hit continuously by anti-tank rifles, mortars, and surviving light guns. The drumbeat of death does not cease. The thick armor is covered in deep gouges and long scratches, looking like a lunar landscape pockmarked by meteors. But it remains monolithic. Absolute combat invulnerability has been proven with the enemy's blood. The men inside the steel box are balancing on the edge of consciousness. Their brains are jarred by the continuous acoustic shocks against the hull. Their stomachs cramp with nausea. Their eyes are swollen and bloodshot from the acrid smoke. Every breath comes with an agonizing, cutting pain in the chest. But the machine is alive. The Soviet heavyweight continues its destructive work. In the deafening internal silence of severe shell shock, relying solely on raw reflexes and muscle memory, the crew maintains a lethal, continuous fire. The battle subsides. The roar of the guns slowly fades, dissolving into the thick morning air. The crash of explosions gives way to the monotonous, heavy drone of a widespread fire. The forest is burning. Acrid black smoke blankets the ravaged earth in a dense veil. The cannonade breaks off, and a strange, oppressive silence sets in, broken only by the fierce crackle of burning wood, the hiss of boiling marsh water, and the dull secondary explosions of enemy ammo racks. The air shimmers from the heat. The narrow forest road has turned into a giant funeral pyre for the Wehrmacht's elite. The fire sack worked with ruthless precision. The result of the slaughter exceeds any tactical calculation. On a narrow stretch of the filthy road, dozens of scorched German tanks sit frozen. The column is completely destroyed, crushed by the steel press of a single strongpoint. Armored vehicles with charred white crosses have turned into shapeless heaps of twisted, glowing metal. Torn tracks hang lifelessly into the mire. Turrets, blown off by internal detonations, lie in the stagnant water. The vanguard of the offensive has choked on its own blood. The enemy is broken, their confidence burned along with their vaunted equipment. One machine stopped the mechanized flow. One crew ground down an entire unit. This was no accident. This was cold, mathematical calculation multiplied by the extreme physical endurance of the men inside the armor. The Soviet giant stands motionless in its cratered position. 47 tons of monolithic steel slowly cool in the blue-gray smoke. The tank is mangled beyond recognition. The green factory paint is completely burned away or stripped by the monstrous impacts of kinetic slugs. The bare, rough metal is covered in thick soot and lead streaks. Deep, jagged craters yawn on the frontal hull plates and the sloped walls of the turret, the terrible marks of colossal artillery pressure. 135 direct hits. 135 brutal kinetic strikes, any one of which would have been lethal for any other machine in this war. The enemy struck with armor-piercing, sub-caliber, and high-explosive shells at point-blank range, desperately trying to pry open this steel box. The armor held. The engineering compromise between massive weight and absolute protection proved its superiority. The tank looks like a piece of a dead asteroid. Dents overlap dents. The sharp edges of torn metal glint with fresh steel through the thick layer of soot. The protection is mangled, shredded, and beaten bloody, but never once breached. Not a single enemy shell could overcome the final millimeter of Soviet rolled steel. The machine took the full, frantic fury of the enemy's barrage and remained in the fight. This is the iron tally of the battle, indisputable proof of superiority, crudely hammered into the hardened armor plates. Inside the smoke-filled fighting compartment, the men are slowly coming to their senses. The commander stares tensely through the cracked periscope. The optics miraculously survived, though the thick glass is covered in an opaque web of fractures. Methodically, he coldly surveys the panorama of total destruction. The dull ringing in his ears drowns out the crackle of the flames. The gunner's hands rest limply on the hot traverse wheels. The loader sits heavily on an empty wooden ammo crate, staring blankly at his horribly burned, bloody palms. The nervous tension slowly releases the cramped muscles of his back. The battlefield is unconditionally theirs. Suddenly, the static landscape breaks. The enemy is still breathing. Behind the wide hulk of the burning lead tank, a gray shadow shifts. One German machine survived the hell. The enemy driver managed to reverse in time and hide behind a dead comrade. The turret of the surviving enemy turns slowly with a creak, its short barrel blindly seeking the mangled silhouette of the Soviet heavyweight. A blinding flash. The German gun fires at point-blank range, the single shot shattering the illusion of silence. The shell, with a piercing howl, covers the short distance over the marsh. A direct hit on the right cheek of the turret. 47 tons of metal shudder once more. A spray of blinding yellow sparks showers in all directions. The slug ricochets off the thick armor with a deafening clang and arcs high into the gray sky. Another deep dent is simply added to the 100 before it. The enemy showed desperation, but they made a fatal mistake, giving away their position with a single shot. The crew's reaction is instantaneous. No panic, no wasted thought, only the cold, brutal automatism of surviving professionals. "Target 1, behind the burner! A P!" The commander's voice cuts through the stagnant air like a razor. The loader's bloody hands, acting on raw muscle memory, grab a heavy fixed round. His spasming muscles forget the pain. A hard slam into the breech. The steel breech block clacks hungrily. "Ready!" The gunner glues his good eye to the murky reticle. The hand wheels spin with frantic speed. The crosshairs catch the narrow sliver of the German turret. "Fire!" The tank jerks sharply from the crushing recoil. The return shot leaves the enemy no chance. The Soviet armor-piercing shell shears the turret of the German machine off its ring with a crunch. A massive internal detonation puts a final, violent period on the duel. A huge piece of mangled metal flies above the trees and falls heavily into the marsh muck, kicking up a pillar of filthy water. The enemy is destroyed, finally and irrevocably. The steel giant falls still again, shrouded in the powder smoke of its last shot. Now, a true, hollow silence of death sets in. The iron tally is closed. The workday is over. Silence crashes down on the crew like a multi-ton weight. The battle is over. Adrenaline drains rapidly, leaving behind a gutted, ringing emptiness. The tension breaks sharply, painfully snapping their internal resolve. The tankers' bodies are instantly filled with leaden weight. Muscles, twisted by a multi-hour spasm of survival, begin to tremble uncontrollably. A dense, continuous high-frequency whistle from dozens of direct hits rings in their ears, drilling into the brain. The air inside the cramped steel capsule is unbreathable, a mix of powder smoke, fumes of red-hot metal, burnt wiring, and acrid sweat. The temperature begins to drop, and their soaked cotton tunics cling to their backs like cold compresses. Through the murky glass of the periscope, the commander stares silently at the road. Death is burning there. Dozens of mangled German tanks have permanently blocked the path east. Black, oily smoke rises toward the gray sky. Red-hot metal is melting. The enemy is destroyed. This is the direct work of their filthy, burned hands. Inside the armored box, there is no room for pride or bright triumph. Only the dull, hollow realization of a hard job done. The human psyche cannot process such volumes of physical destruction without consequence. The mind desperately seeks safety anchors to keep from sliding into the abyss. They survived where survival was impossible. The dry logic of war demanded their death 2 hours ago. When the mathematics of survival fails, blind, primal faith takes its place. Psychological defense works primitively. The loader unconsciously strokes a cold rivet on the gun breech with fingers worn to the raw meat. This piece of metal has become his personal deity, a talisman that warded off the flying steel. The radio operator gunner tightly grips a tattered letter in his breast pocket. The paper has long been soaked in machine oil and sweat, but these few lines keep him afloat. Thoughts of home are not a sentimental weakness. They are a steel cable that ties a man to reality. They became one mechanism with the heavy machine, but they remained living men, and the flesh now demands payment for the horror endured. Suddenly, the static tableau of internal numbness shatters. Danger strikes from within. An invisible enemy deals a cruel blow. Carbon monoxide. Propellant gases had been building up unnoticed in the fighting compartment, quietly poisoning their blood. The gunner wheezes heavily, his shoulders jerking unnaturally. His fingers slip from the steel hand wheels of the traverse gear. He slumps slowly, like a heavy sack, onto the turret's diamond plate floor.
His head strikes the gun's breech with a dull thud. Consciousness snuffs out instantly. The brain's oxygen deprivation has reached an absolute breaking point. Suffocating inside your own tank is a common end in heavy combat. The commander's instincts never tire. He lunges toward his fallen comrade, rough hands seizing the gunner by the collar of his sweat-soaked tunic. A powerful yank upward, and the body hangs limp in his arms. "Hold him!" The loader grabs the sagging shoulders. The commander backhands the gunner with brutal force. Once. Twice. The strikes are sharp and heavy. This isn't cruelty. It is the only crude resuscitation available. Harsh physical pain must drag the man back from toxic oblivion. A third blow draws blood from a split lip. The gunner gasps convulsively, sucking in the tainted air with a rasp. He breaks into a violent, hacking cough, his eyes rolling aimlessly beneath soot-stained eyelids. "Breathe. Keep it steady." The commander's voice sounds muffled, as if coming from beneath layers of damp earth. The gunner spits a glob of dark phlegm onto the floor. Consciousness returns reluctantly. He gives a weak nod. He's alive. The commander leans heavily against the cold armor. It is time to check the machinery. It is time to check the men. "Crew, report!" The words fall heavy, like iron weights. This isn't a formal roll call. It's a confirmation of existence. "Driver, good," a raspy voice calls from below. For the first time, the driver pries his cramped, claw-like hands from the steel steering levers. "Radio up. Intact." "Loader. Good." The loader is lying, instinctively hiding his burned palms, covered in horrific blisters, behind his back. "Gunner. Alive." The voices sound cracked, bone-dry. Their vocal cords are scorched by the fumes. The dialogue is fragmented. Every word requires immense physical effort. The roll call is over. 5 men. 5 exhausted, concussed, deafened men inside 47 tons of scarred metal. The commander pulls out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. His fingers tremble slightly. He spends a long time striking a spark from his lighter. A weak, yellow flame illuminates their filthy, soot-covered faces. He takes a deep drag. The bitter tobacco smoke feels like pure oxygen compared to the cordite fumes. He silently passes the cigarette to the loader, who takes it with 2 shaking fingers. They smoke in a circle, silently. A grim ritual of survivors. Outside, burning metal pops with a dull sound. The path is blocked by an iron shield. The price of this barrier is scorched nerves and a permanently shattered psyche. They sit in the gloom, surrounded by dozens of spent shell casings. Desolation has become their new and only reality. Far to the west, another front is unfolding. A paper one. East Prussia.
The Wehrmacht's perfectly tuned bureaucratic machine suffers a critical failure. A standard sheet of heavy paper lies on a wide oak table, a dry report from the front lines. The black letters of the typed text record a catastrophe. The mathematics of the German Blitzkrieg have been ruthlessly broken. Expected victory dispatches have been replaced by endless lists of destroyed equipment. The casualty figures shock the strategists in Berlin. Secure communication devices chatter incessantly with alarming updates. Teletype tapes crawl across the polished wood like white snakes. In the spacious office of an Army Group field headquarters, the heavy air is thick with acrid tobacco smoke. A distant artillery barrage makes the window panes vibrate dully. The sound of explosions rhythmically hammers at the frayed nerves of the general staff. A detailed topographical map of the Leningrad sector is spread across the long table. The predatory red arrows of German panzer wedges had been slicing through space with confidence. Now, they are jammed against a single, static point. An unyielding Soviet steel spike has been driven deep into this swampy corduroy road. The atmosphere in the HQ is charged to the absolute limit. General staff officers frantically shuffle through operational reports, the collars of their stiff black tunics unbuttoned. The perfect plan for a massive offensive is rapidly coming apart at the seams. The reason for this unforeseen halt defies the formal logic of German military doctrine. Technical superiority has suffered a brutal misfire. Confirmed vanguard losses, dozens of armored vehicles burned out. The Oberst reads the encrypted telegram in a dry tone, his voice cracking betrayingly. He nervously crumples a duplicate copy of the report in his fist, turning official stationery into trash. The reason for the delay? A well-camouflaged, heavy Russian anti-tank battery?
An impassable minefield.
The gray-haired general leans heavily on the table with both hands, his knuckles white with tension. He categorically refuses to believe the cold casualty figures. Negative, Herr General. The road is completely blocked by a single heavy tank of unknown design.
Call in the Stukas. Immediately. Flatten that box with 1,000-kilogram bombs.
Air support is completely useless in the dense forest. The machine has merged with the landscape. Our standard 37 and 50mm anti-tank guns cannot penetrate the Soviet armor. Dozens of direct hits have been recorded. The shells ricochet helplessly off the turret. The tank continues to lay down accurate, lethal fire. The column is decimated. A staff officer rips a ruined sheet of paper with uncontrollable force. The sharp crack of tearing cardstock seems louder than the cannon fire outside. Panic is slowly but surely creeping into the pedantic minds of the commanders. This isn't just a local tactical defeat in the woods. It is the deafening collapse of the fundamental myth of technical superiority. The problem is rapidly spiraling out of the General Staff's tight control. The threat is rising from below, from the trenches. Elite German panzer crews are openly sabotaging direct orders from command. Hardened veterans of the French and Polish campaigns, accustomed to easy victories, flatly refuse to launch a frontal assault. Fear of the invulnerable steel monster has paralyzed the offensive drive. Wehrmacht soldiers are giving the unknown heavy tank grim, mystical nicknames. In the muddy trenches, an ominous legend is being born of a ghost tank, a devil machine that coolly withstands hundreds of direct hits and methodically burns the attacking German ranks to the ground. The psychological breakdown of elite troops is becoming the most critical factor. The army is irreversibly losing momentum. Losing the tempo of maneuver means the inevitable failure of the entire 1941 campaign.
The report is immediately sent up the chain of command. The secret document lands directly on the desk at the Führer's headquarters. The dry facts of losses inflicted by a single gun trigger an uncontrollable fit of animalistic rage. The Reich's top leadership suddenly realizes the true scale of their technological failure. German industry has failed to provide the army with an adequate means of penetration. Existing tank calibers are officially declared completely obsolete in the face of the new Soviet armor. An emergency, uncompromising order is issued. A document marked with a red stripe is immediately dispatched to the frontline troops via secure lines. The directive is crystal clear. Destroy Soviet super heavy tanks at any cost. It is mandatory to bring in heavy 88mm anti-aircraft gun crews. Use heavy core artillery for direct fire. Employ special combat engineer assault teams with explosives. Disregard your own manpower losses entirely.
A single Soviet tank has been officially classified as a strategic threat of national proportions. Panic breeds new, even more desperate decisions. The order is accompanied by a secret, harsh directive for the Reich Ministry of Armaments. German design engineers receive an uncompromising ultimatum. The front needs brand new, ultra-powerful, long-barreled guns immediately. They need a new generation of heavy machines capable of guaranteed penetration of thick Soviet armor at long ranges. Germany's massive military-industrial complex begins to pivot frantically. The flywheel of the arms race receives a colossal, irreversible acceleration from a single forest skirmish near Leningrad. The panic in high-level Berlin offices is immediately converted into new death sentences for German tankers on the front lines. General staff orders are not subject to debate. Officers drive fresh armored formations to certain death, desperately trying to bury a single, insurmountable Soviet obstacle under metal and human flesh. The paper front ruthlessly demands real, physical blood. The legend of the impenetrable Soviet tank has already been forged, spreading through the Wehrmacht trenches like wildfire. A single crew made the top of the German war machine tremble. A single scarred tank broke the schedule of the lightning war. Precious time has been hopelessly lost. The Blitzkrieg mechanism has suffered a fatal, deep crack. A breach that can no longer be patched by hysterical orders or thousands of tons of twisted Krupp steel. The order is fulfilled. The column is burned. The fire mission is closed. Their time at the position has expired. There will be no rest. The commander dryly accepts new coordinates. The war demands their presence elsewhere. The driver presses the stiff starter button with force. The electric starter wails under the strain. The mighty 12-cylinder diesel turns over heavily. Once. Twice. The cold engine coughs a dark cloud of black smoke. Ignition. The fuel explodes. The engine roars to life with a deafening howl. A fierce vibration hammers through their exhausted bodies. 47 tons of scarred Soviet steel tear away from the peat with a crunch. Wide tracks grind the damp earth and red-hot shell casings. The tank reverses heavily, its hull snapping young pines. The machine leaves its ambush site forever. They leave behind a smoking graveyard of the Wehrmacht elite. Ahead lie hundreds of kilometers of the unknown. The war is only beginning to unfold. The crew harbors no illusions. They know every rivet of the machine intimately. The Kliment Voroshilov series heavy tank is a triumph of impenetrable armor and a daily nightmare for the chassis. The steel giant's Achilles heel is hidden deep within the engine transmission compartment. The weak transmission catastrophically fails to handle the colossal weight. The fragile gearbox shatters under the extreme loads of regular marches. Steel gears crumble ruthlessly. Shifting gears requires superhuman physical strength. The driver slams the stiff levers with his entire body weight, bracing his feet against the floor. His fingers have long been bloodied against the rough handles. Every kilometer burns through precious liters of scarce fuel. Moving forward becomes a continuous struggle against the machine itself. The tank can withstand hundreds of direct hits, but it can grind to a dead halt in the middle of a battle because of a single snapped linkage. The dense forest thins out. The tank cautiously emerges into the open. A wide field stretches before the optics. This is the zone of maximum danger, an ideal target for enemy aircraft. The commander continuously scans the horizon through the periscope. "Go! Give it full speed!" The driver floors the pedal. The engine roars furiously. 47 tons accelerate through the mucky ground. The suspension hammers mercilessly at every rut. The men grit their teeth. They are racing to clear the open ground. The tank reaches the middle of the field, the point of absolute vulnerability. Suddenly, the steady drone of the diesel falters. The RPMs drop catastrophically. A metallic cough hits their ears. The heavy machine jerks forward on inertia and grinds to a dead halt in the middle of the wasteland. The engine stalls. A terrifying silence falls. The tracks give one last clank. An airlock has blocked the fuel line. A massive gray target sits motionless under the open sky. The sound of death comes from above. A distant hum grows into a heavy wail. Enemy aircraft. German dive bombers spot the target instantly. They begin a steep dive, the air tearing from the scream of sirens. "Start it!" the commander bellows. "It won't catch!" the driver screams desperately. He jams the starter button. The diesel gives a hollow rasp and stays silent. The batteries were drained during the ambush. The driver lunges from his seat. In the unbearable cramped space, he fumbles for a 5-kilogram steel sledgehammer. He squeezes past the scorching bulkhead. One precise action is required. He swings in the narrow gap, skinning his elbows raw. A crushing blow with the heavy sledgehammer against the casing of the jammed starter. A deafening ring. The stuck brushes snap free. The driver tosses the hammer aside and drops back behind the levers. "Now!" His finger jams the button. Contact. The starter cranks the heavy flywheel. The diesel hungrily gulps air and explodes into a steady roar. A black cloud erupts from the exhaust pipes. "Move!" The driver violently yanks both levers. The tracks bite into the ground with a vengeance. The tank lunges forward, dirt flying from beneath the road wheels. In that same split second, the first high-explosive bomb lands 10 meters behind them. The blast heaves tons of earth into the air. The shock wave shoves the machine forward. Hot shrapnel peppers the steel. At full tilt, the tank plunges into the saving shadow of the dense forest. Hidden. The engine is running steady. The crew breathes in ragged gasps, swallowing acrid smoke. No cheering. Death just passed them by. This is a brief reprieve. The tankers silently take their stations. The loader rests his burned hands on the cooling breech. The gunner presses his eye to the murky sight. The battered steel monster crawls relentlessly further east. Ahead lie thousands of kilometers of front-line roads, hundreds of burning villages. A singular feat becomes just one line in a report. The heavy daily labor of the Great War continues. A single heavy tank does not win a global war. 47 tons of Soviet steel cannot physically stop a multi-million-man invasion army. The 1941 model steel monster did not make it to the end of this terrible road. Metal has its own rigid fatigue limit. Thick armor inevitably cracks under continuous artillery pressure. Heavy mechanisms are ground into fine metallic dust. The men inside the fighting machines burn out completely. The crew of this machine accomplished an impossible task on their narrow sector of the front. These tankers didn't destroy the entire Wehrmacht. They did something far more important. They snatched the most priceless, absolutely irreplaceable resource from the enemy. They stole their time. Every minute spent in the suffocating cordite hell of that forest ambush had a precise, measurable price. Every blow from a German armor-piercing slug that was withstood provided a strategic reprieve. Hours won with blood added up to saved evacuation trains. Heavy factory machinery moved deep into the rear, to the east, to the rhythm of rail wheels. A halted German vanguard meant fresh reserve divisions had time to occupy and fortify a new defensive line. 5 concussed, badly burned men, choking on carbon monoxide inside a locked iron box, paid for that vital delay. They became the foundation of future victory. They took upon themselves the most terrifying, most concentrated blow of the first year of a merciless war. The era of the first angular, lumbering giants naturally came to an end. The bulky, heavy machines fully served their brutal purpose. Their massive frontal armor absorbed the crushing kinetic energy of the Blitzkrieg. Their guns broke the perfect offensive tempo of the German Panzer elite. The battered heavyweights were replaced by new engineering solutions. Evacuated factories ramped up production, churning out a continuous stream of maneuverable, high-tech medium tanks. T-34 medium machines rolled off assembly lines by the thousands. They won through speed, numbers, and ruthless industrial efficiency. Following them onto the battlefields came the true heirs of the Soviet school of heavy tank design, the powerful armored machines of the Iosif Stalin series. Their 122mm rifled guns left no chance for the new German menagerie. Heavy shells tore the turrets off enemy machines with a single direct kinetic hit. Optimized cast sloped armor easily shrugged off return fire. These new steel predators smashed through deep echeloned defenses. They turned reinforced bunkers into concrete dust. They confidently crushed the cobblestones of ruined Berlin with their wide tracks. They put the final, bloody period on this slaughter. But the path to that final point was paved by the mangled, burned-out husks of the lumbering machines from the first year of the war. The crews of those first heavy tanks rarely lived to see the victory fireworks in May. Their names were written in dry letters in brief staff reports on irrecoverable losses. Their bodies merged forever with molten metal inside scorched fighting compartments. War is a monstrous, soulless mechanism for processing human flesh into dry historical facts. Surviving tankers returned to ruined cities as gray-haired invalids, with lungs scorched by powder gases, with amputated limbs, with a hollow void in their gaze, and with the eternal, unceasing ringing of artillery ricochets in their ruptured eardrums. Such is the real price of a halted enemy offensive. It is an arithmetic of sacrifice, completely devoid of beautiful, lofty metaphors. Mud, blood, vomit, industrial grease, and clammy, primal fear. Years later, the machines of 1941, mangled by enemy shells, froze forever atop high concrete pedestals. They stand their eternal, absolutely silent watch in city squares and by quiet roads. The heavy track links are welded fast to steel rails. The wedge breeches of their shortguns are permanently locked by thick weld beads. The 12-cylinder diesel hearts were long ago removed from the dark engine compartments. The machines are completely empty inside. They have become symbols of an unbreakable spirit, mute monuments to beyond human endurance. Thick layers of fresh green paint attempt to hide the terrible battle scars every year, but the deep dents from German armor-piercing shells show clearly through the pigment. The jagged furrows in the cast turrets cannot be puttied or erased. This is the raw, physical memory of war. Absolute proof that death hammered at these steel walls 100 times, but could not pass through. The earth long ago swallowed the punctured helmets and brass shell casings. The roots of ancient trees have tightly entwined the rusted road wheels of lost machines. Deep swamps have securely hidden severed turrets. Nature is slowly reclaiming its own. The autumn wind whistles softly through the empty barrel of the 76mm tank gun. Drops of cold rain slide slowly down the sloped frontal armor plate. They wash the gray city dust from old, painted-over wounds. The square before the monument is empty. The deafening thunder of guns, the smell of burned human flesh, and the screams of the wounded are left in the distant past. The 47-ton machine, frozen on its concrete plinth, is absolutely motionless. 75mm of monolithic, hardened armor maintain an icy silence. The metal is dead. Under the heavy gray sky, the wet tank steel remains cold to the touch.